everyone and welcome to the 20th episode of an interview with Mr. Rajesh Talwar. This is your host Ananya Sharma. Today the book in discussion is A Nuclear Matricide. Rajesh, can you tell us what the book is about?
Hi Ananya, it's a pleasure to be with you once again. We had a lot of episodes on the Bose book. And now we are back to discussing other important books. And today's book, a play, is a very important play. A Nuclear Matricide is exactly what it talks about. It talks about the possible destruction of our planet through the use of nuclear weapons.
So Rajesh, why is your book titled A Nuclear Matricide and not a Nuclear Holocaust?
I could have used the term nuclear holocaust instead of a nuclear matricide, Ananya, but despite the terrifying visuals that term originally conjured up, over the years and decades it's become overused, cliched, and it doesn't sort of capture the intensity, the horrific visuals don't come forward when you're using the word Holocaust. Also, the thing is that Holocaust is actually a very homocentric point of view, but because it refers only to destruction of human life on the planet. But the play is about something more. It's talking about destruction potentially of all life on the planet, of the planet itself. And matricide seemed appropriate term for me to use because as an Indian growing up in a culture which has respect for the sacred feminine, there is nothing more horrific than killing your own mother. And for decades we have been poisoning her skies, we have been destroying her rivers, we have been, destroying the forests, we have been conducting a slow massacre of our mother. Across the world, you have princes who kill their fathers, who kill their brothers with a view to ascend a throne in different cultures, in India as well. And this is regarded somewhat acceptable. So fratricide, which is killing your father, killing your brother, or patricide, which is killing your father, is not nearly as horrific as matricide. And matricide, especially in the Indian context, is something which you probably cannot even imagine. I mean, it's something just too horrific for words. But this is what we are doing. And I wanted a powerful expression. For me, a nuclear matricide conjures up the terrifying visual of what we are potentially about to unleash onto our planet, Mother Earth. So this is the reason for the title.
So your play is a mixture of satire and realism. Can you tell us about the satire a bit?
Yes, Ananya, it's a mixture of satire and realism, but I've tried to keep up a coherent narrative. One of the important satirical scenes is right in the beginning, where God, the Christian God, is having a conversation with Saint Peter. If you remember, Saint Peter is the guardian to the pearly gates. So all souls have to go to Saint Peter and he decides whether they're going to go to hell or going to go to heaven. So Saint Peter comes to God in a crisis. And God says, "What's up? You look very worried." And he says, "I have to ask you to revise your rules because since time immemorial, you have given me a certain amount of time to do the decision making whether a soul should be sent to heaven or hell. But now I need more time." And this is around the mid-40s, at the time when Hiroshima and Nagasaki were attacked by the Americans and hundreds of thousands of people died. So Saint Peter explains to God that there are all these souls which are coming all of a sudden, and I have to make all these decisions. And God says, "Don't you have the other saints to help you?" He says, "Yes, I have the saints, but there are too many people coming." And God says, "What has happened? In the past I have been sending pestilences, I've been sending droughts, I've been sending famines to the planet, and you've always managed to do things on time." And Saint Peter says, "Now it's a different scenario. God is different because never in the history of the world have so many people been killed in such a short span of time. In a matter of just a few minutes, hundreds of thousands of people have died. This has never happened. And all those souls are going to be coming to me. So please, I need more time to do the sorting out, who's going to go to hell, who's going to go to heaven. So this is an example of satire. It's not a very realistic scene, although some people could think of it as realistic. There's another satirical scene which is also partly realistic, where you have an alien species which comes to the planet and they colonize Earth. So there's a scene where one of the generals, General Hairies, is having a meal, and you have these human beings who are hung naked upside down, just like in a butcher shop you have, animals who are slaughtered and they are hung upside down, and General is enjoying the food, and there's a naked human who is trussed up, who questions the general, and he says, "How can you do this? How can you be so uncivilized?" And the general asks him, he says, "Well, you call me uncivilized. How have you been treating the animals on your own planet?" So I feel that is satire as well as realism. I'm sure it will please the vegetarian audience very much. They will feel this is true. We treat animals with great cruelty. So why should we expect an alien species to treat the human being with greater respect when we have been treating other animals on our planet in such a terrible fashion? So elements of satire, elements of realism.
Alright, so let's come to the realistic part now. What are the realistic scenarios in the play?
Ananya, it's a matter of historical record that we have on the planet come to close to the brink of nuclear war at least on 9 occasions. And on these 9 occasions, the fact that nuclear war did not happen is not because of great wisdom demonstrated on the part of the human species, but to put it in the words of an American diplomat, we simply lucked out. So somebody might say that human beings are very stupid because we had this great First World War and lessons should have been learnt. But just in 20 years after that, we had a Second World War. So obviously, we are not very smart as a species, that in 20 years we were busy slaughtering each other once again. Someone might say that, okay, but after the Second World War, nothing has happened. We had a long Cold War, but there has been no hot World War on that scale. Does that mean we have been very wise, or does that mean we have become more intelligent? Possibly not. I mean, I just mentioned that on 9 occasions at least we simply lucked out. So there are dangerous scenarios looming all over the planet, and it's not only North Korea which we should be worried about. In order to make it more interesting for the audience, I talk realistically of 2 scenarios. One concerning a conflict between Singapore and Malaysia, which has the potential to break out into, a nuclear conflagration involving much of the globe. And the second is, of course, closer to home, an Indo-Pakistan nuclear conflict.
Alright Rajesh, correct me if I'm wrong, but neither Malaysia nor Singapore have nuclear weapons, so how can it turn into a nuclear war?
Thanks, Adanya. That's a very intelligent question. But the Second World War, I visited in my time with an international organization. I was in Bosnia, at the very place where the Second World War started off. So quite often there was an incident even in the First World War, which sparks off a great conflagration. So you're right, Singapore is not a nuclear armed nation, Malaysia is also not a nuclear armed nation, but both of them have allies. And this is what happened in earlier wars, that the allies get drawn into the conflict. So the Singapore-Malaysia potential conflict is where there's a conflict between the ethnic Chinese in Malaysia and the ethnic Malays. There's some, Chinese stall which is selling halal meat, so-called, and it turns out it's not halal. It turns out it's sort of pork in it, and it becomes a matter of conflict. Rioting starts. The Chinese are attacked by the Malays. Many of them, they run to escape from the slaughter. They run to Singapore. Now this is not something which is I've just pulled out of the air. You know, there have been conflicts earlier. The Chinese have been discriminated against. The Chinese have been targeted in Malaysia. Now, what happens in a scenario like that is that potentially Singapore can say, let's, think of the possibility if we have a conflict with Malaysia, what's going to happen? And then they will think of allies. Malaysia too will think that, well, Singapore is technically very advanced. It's a very much smaller nation in terms of population, but they will also think of who they need as allies. They will think of maybe Indonesia, their populous neighbor. They will think of other Muslim nations. Singapore will think immediately of China, which is nuclear armed. Malaysia may be prompted to think of Pakistan, that maybe we can get some nuclear weapons from them. So the world today, we live in such an interconnected world. Our planet is so interconnected that a conflict in one small part of the world, where the parties to the conflict do not have nuclear weapons, it can still potentially turn into a serious nuclear conflagration.
So can you tell us a bit more about the Indo-Pakistan nuclear war that you were telling us about, because I'm pretty sure that our viewers will be more interested in that.
Thanks, Ananya. Just so that I don't get a little ahead of myself, I should mention that in one of the opening scenes we have these aliens somewhere in the cosmos, light years away from our planet, who are looking at our planet and talking to themselves, and they are discussing potential scenarios. And one of the aliens tells the other, this species, the humans, they are not very wise. And the other alien disputes this. And so it's a conversation between these aliens during the course of an interplanetary conference, where they're discussing potential scenarios which could lead to nuclear war on Earth. And then they zoom in on the Malaysia-Singapore scenario, and after that on the Indo-Pak potential nuclear conflict. So coming to your question, the Indo-Pak nuclear conflict, we have a jihadi who is urging the Pakistan Prime Minister, let's nuke India. They need to be taught a lesson. They have been misbehaving with us on the Kashmir issue, on other issues. Let's use a tactical nuclear weapon somewhere in Rajasthan so that we get the Indians worried about it. And we teach the Indians how to behave. And then there is a sensible Pakistani who explains to him that, listen, if you do this, the Indians would attack us back and Pakistan will be destroyed. Recently, when the conflict broke out just a few weeks ago, we had this situation where you had General Musharraf saying during the course of an interview, he said, well, we cannot attack India with a nuclear weapon because if we use one weapon, India will respond with 20, they will destroy the entire Pakistan. There will be nothing left of Pakistan. But there's one more thing which General Musharraf did not add, which is important and which is discussed in this play, in this potential conflict between India and Pakistan. Because although my play was published a few months earlier, this is an exactly similar conversation taking place. And so then the jihadi says that, okay, you are right, if we attack India with a nuclear weapon, they might respond with 20 and destroy the whole of Pakistan, but why don't we just destroy all of India? Let's attack them with all we've got and destroy this infidel country. And there also you have a sane Pakistani voice which explains to this guy, this stupid man, He says, listen, you cannot destroy India without destroying Pakistan itself. Because you use so much nuclear weapon on India, there will be a cloud and it will, oversee the entire area. It will spread across the planet. You cannot possibly destroy India without destroying the planet itself. Certainly, Pakistan cannot escape. If they destroy India, Pakistan will also simultaneously be destroyed. So, these are real conversations taking place. I won't tell you what happens to the Singapore-Malaysia conflict or what happens to the Indo-Pak potential conflict, because that will be giving away the story of the play. But it's just two very realistic scenarios how they can potentially play out.